Welcome to Multiversal Studios.
In this video, we're going to be discussing why we think Fairy Tail is the best anime ever. Just kidding, Fairy Tail is a bunch of bull. Now, I know what you're all thinking, but at least hear us out first.
My first problem is the insane power scaling in the Fairy Tail Guild, and I mean ridiculous. The main character Natsu is a fire-breathing dragon slayer, and throughout the series it becomes harder and harder to figure out how powerful he really is.
Tell me about it, DJ. Do you remember when Natsu and Gaju were getting their asses kicked in the Grand Magical games by Sting the Light Dragon Slayer? Then you'd look away for 1 second and Natsu is not only beating Sting, but his brother Rogue single-handedly, and that's while both of them are using their Dragon Force. Natsu still in his base form, and all he had was his friends cheering him on, which is apparently just as powerful.
This becomes incredibly annoying, as there are occasions when Natsu defeats an opponent way above his power level, and then immediately loses to someone else, almost erasing the previous build-up of power.
So an example of this would be when Natsu, a mere fledgling at the time, was facing Loxus, who's an S-class wizard, the highest rank in the Fairy Tail Guild. Loxus, who was previously beating Erza, suddenly gets beaten by Natsu, who had a surge of power from eating his lightning, and then he just KOs him. And then the next episode, Erza just knocks out Natsu with 1 punch. Now, I know what you're gonna say, it wasn't a serious fight between Natsu and Erza, but Natsu is taking all those heavy blows from Loxus, but he can't take 1 non-powered hit from Erza. Also, how come none of the other Dragon Slayers get hybrid powers like Natsu and Gargiel? Like in the Grand Magic games, when Gargiel absorbs Rogue's magic. I guess you just have to be the protagonist.
Now the main reason this irritates me is because his power seems to come out of nowhere. Like there's literally no explanation as to why Natsu is incredibly weak at some parts of the fight and incredibly powerful at other parts of the fight, apart from bad writing. Now don't get me wrong, you see this quite often in other animes as well, however nowhere as near as often as Fairy Tail. Also, just to be clear, the other Fairy Tail members have the same stupid power scaling, but that's for another video. Some may argue that Natsu's backstory of him being END, a demon, explains Natsu's random spurts of power throughout the entire anime. However, it is clear in the fight versus Grey versus END, that Natsu has only ever used his demonic powers once, which you can clearly see through his physical transformation of his appearance and his voice. Another thing that gets on my nerves about Fairy Tail is that anyone associated with the Fairy Tail Guild, including throwaway characters, are practically immune to death.
Now, in the Alpers arc, there's meant to be a large-scale war. And what do you normally associate with war? Casualties, right? But no, not in Fairy Tail. Never in Fairy Tail. Do you know why I think the real reason the anime is called Fairy Tail? Is because there has to be a fairy tale ending for each of the protagonists. I mean, once I saw Gargiel escape from the depths of hell due to Irene using Universe 1 against Technologia at the exact same time that he's about to die, and he managed to survive. Surprise, surprise.
Oh, and when did Lucy master runic magic, which she used to keep Natsu from dying? I mean, she managed to rewrite the whole book of END in order to keep Natsu alive, somehow. Zerif, the all-powerful black wizard, wrote this book, and Lucy just waved her magic wand and reversed it without any trouble.
Even the master of the Fairy Tail Guild, who's been at death's door since episode 1, still manages to survive through the entire anime. Loxus was told,
Master Makarov! I mean, your grandfather is close to death!
And afterwards he made a miraculous recovery. And I think the most ridiculous of all is again in the Alpers arc, where Makarov uses fairy lore against a ton of soldiers. And because this spell is such a powerful one that's meant to have a more adverse effect on the caster the more people are trying to use it on, he was confirmed dead, and we never saw him again until the very last episode when again he made a miraculous recovery. I mean, is anyone surprised at this point? Come on.
Even the characters in Fairy Tail who aren't as relevant, the writers can't help but bring them back as well. When characters die in an anime, it's supposed to be emotional and heartbreaking. And a good example of this is when Jiraiya died in Naruto. He was a great character, but they didn't need to bring him back, as his death pushes the story further. And to top it all off, Lizana, a character who died at the very beginning of the anime, was resurrected through a parallel dimension, which, if I'm being honest with you, was kind of underwhelming, as after the arc is over, she becomes another irrelevant member of Fairy Tail, almost like they brought her back for nothing. The last point I'm going to make is how overpowered and weak the villains are at the same time. Like, how can you hype up all these villains when the climax is so disappointing?
The way they introduced the Dark Guild Tartarus was brilliant, as one member of Tartarus killed the entire Magic Council with a click of his fingers, and another member hospitalised the entire Thunder Legion. This made you think, wow, Tartarus is really strong, but no. Fairy Tail managed to defeat them with ease without any casualties. Take a look at Acnologia. They hype him up for the entire show to be as strong as Madara. He's immune to magic, and hell, he even took out God's Rainer of all people with a single hit. Clearly the ultimate threat to end the show with.
Usually in the final battle with the big villains, it's meant to be a big long fight with tons of twists and involving great fight scenes. But no, the fights with Acnologia and Zeref felt really rushed. The reason it felt rushed was because compared to early on in the series, the characters use well established moves, whereas Zeref, on the other hand, the master of all magic, and Acnologia, who claims to be the king of all dragons. They seem to resort to generic explosions and lasers in order to fight against the Fairy Tail Guild. Acnologia in human form ends up getting wiped out with one single punch.
Leave it to me! I'm ending this right now!
Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure you like and subscribe. Also, leave a comment with your thoughts on Fairy Tail.